Our brains need to be interested. However, we have to find a different way for our brains to be interested in what we're doing than constantly changing what we're doing, because otherwise we're never following through, never completing anything to get clients into our door so we can help them and, quite frankly, pull in revenue. Like, it's a both and. And if we are not completing things because we get bored with something and then shift, that's a problem. If we're hoping our business to actually be more than just a hobby, right? If we actually want to be out there helping people and being paid to do it so that we can put our energy fully into it instead of like half-ass helping people because we're not being paid for it. So we're just like, okay, this is like volunteer work and I just need to keep my other job, right? It splits your focus. It makes it harder to be present. Hi, I'm Jen Barnes, and you're about to experience how to ditch the old ways of doing things, embrace your neurodivergence, learn tips and tricks to function optimally, and love yourself, neurodivergence and all. Welcome to the Self-Loved Woman podcast. Hey, it's Jen. I'm so glad you're here. I'm about to share how to stop hustling and really crush your productivity, even with ADHD. So if that sounds good to you, stick around. And before I dig in, or maybe this is the first part of digging in, I want to say something really important, which is that we are not our productivity. Our productivity does not equal our value. And so that's a really important distinction, especially for those of us with ADHD, where our character has been attacked based on our productivity. We do have an executive function difference in our brain that can make doing things and being productive more challenging, for sure. And I want to honor that reality as well as the reality that, like, we have those wounds of people telling us that we need to try harder, or you can focus here, but you can't focus there, or you can focus when you want to. And that kind of stuff has its wounds. And so as I come in here, I don't want to come in hot with be more productive, because I know that is interwoven with so many different pieces. And so even as I share that we're going to talk about productivity, you might pause and notice, what do you feel in your body? If you feel heaviness, you might have some history around not being productive, about being judged for not being productive, or maybe you take great pride in being productive, but then realize there's also some downsides to being hyperproductive, which we're going to talk about. So I just want to name all of that because this is a really complex issue that I'm going to attempt to simplify for the sheer fact of I like to keep these relatively short. I aim for 20 minutes. Usually I'm like 30. Once in a while, I'll get to an hour, especially I have a guest. So I'm going to simplify this really complex topic for those of us with ADHD. And I want to just name that out front. You might notice if when I say the word productivity, you feel something in your body, that might be something worth journaling about or talking to a therapist or coach about, because there may be some old wounds there that might be getting in your way, in addition to all the other fun ADHD traits. Maybe I'm saying fun a little sarcastically there, but anyway. So here's what most people do with ADHD. Most people hustle and push hard and just work harder, and just it's the pushing, right? And almost forcing themselves to do stuff. And I get it, right? Like, I get why we learn to do that, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But the problem is when you do that, you likely end up being able to get some stuff done, but then crashing for like at least a day, or like some of my clients, like 2 or 3 days. And I even know some like for a week, right? Where it's just nope. And that happens because we only have so much ability to get ourselves to focus the way our brain is. And it's almost like we just burn out that ability and we need rest to overcome it. It's not actually almost like anything. That's what's happening, is we're burning out our brain. And the way to get through that then is through nothingness and rest. And that's the cycle that a lot of us find ourselves in. You might find yourself in that. I know I've certainly found myself in that sometimes, so there's no shame in it. But the bigger problem is when we do this, we are dysregulating our nervous system over and over again to help ourselves be productive. And if you're anything like me, when I've am in this pattern. I do it less now, but I can still get into it. But if you're anything like me with this pattern, you might sustain this for weeks or months, right? Like where you're going hard, you're going hard. This happened recently with my last launch. I was pushing and pushing and pushing and going hard, and I can get stuff done. It's amazing. I have some really strong tools and some ways of being that we'll talk about later that help with some of that. And still, at the end of it, though, then it's really hard to function. I'm really tired. And I got to tell you, at 50, it works even less well. And I need more rest after that kind of episode of pushing, right? Of this pattern showing up. While this pattern might seem useful over time, we're just dysregulating our nervous system over and over. And here's why that's a problem. When we talk about nervous system regulation, let me back up. What I'm talking about is we're putting ourselves in protective responses, like our fight or flight response or our shutdown response, usually our fight or flight response, because shutdown is where we end up later after we've pushed and pushed, right? And we do need a little bit of our sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight response is part of that. We need a little bit of sympathetic nervous system activation to get things done, like everybody does. That's just not people with ADHD. If you've heard me talk about polyvagal theory and the three main parts of the autonomic nervous system, I often simplify that because we can have blended states and often do have blended states as a way to do things or to digest or to sleep. So it's just these things are all interwoven much more complexly than I'm saying them now. But essentially what happens when we push and force and work hard, we end up getting ourselves into our fight or flight response. And chronically being there, we will get burned out and perhaps even completely shut down. And that's the cycle we're getting ourselves into when we rely on the pushing. And it's not just hard work, it's like intensely, wildly hard work. But if you're in this cycle of push, crash, that's what I'm talking about. And when you're in this cycle of push, crash, that's going to negatively impact your sleep, right? It's really hard to sleep when your nervous system is activated like that. You're going to have a hard time winding down at night, which can already be hard for ADHD. So we're just exacerbating the problem. It can be harder to focus, believe it or not. If you think about it, just even logically, our fight or flight response is to help us fight or flee. And so it doesn't matter if we create great content for our launch or have a nice podcast episode or respond to 1 million emails or create a bunch of emails if we have a tiger chasing us, right? Like none of that stuff matters. And the fight or flight response originally was for when we were in life-threatening danger. But your nervous system doesn't know the difference. And so when you have all this stuff to do that you're pushing and pushing yourself, your nervous system isn't like, oh, it's just me pushing myself. It's okay. I can be serene right now and chill and still just really focus. No, your nervous system is, oh my gosh, threat, 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 threat. And yeah, you can probably focus and get some stuff done. Ooh, that just activated my sympathetic nervous system. And yet, when you're there, it can be even harder to focus on the stuff you need to do. Because in the fight or flight response, your brain, your body, everything is all focused on survival. And doing a podcast episode, writing a bunch of emails, creating launch contact has nothing to do with survival. Not immediately. If you're like, well, Jen, if I don't make money, then I won't. That's a whole different thing. But that's not how your nervous system works. Your nervous system is like, well, I mean, we need to plan ahead and see this as it's a life-threatening danger. It's that your nervous system isn't a planner. It's, am I in imminent danger? Yes or no? And if your nervous system perceives that you are by being in your fight or flight response because you're pushing, then all your other things will go out the window. It will get harder and harder for you to focus. That's why when I work with people on maximizing focus and we increase concentration, one of the things we have to talk about is nervous system regulation. So this very thing that you might be doing to help you get more done is actually getting in the way. And it's not just like your ability to focus, but like I said, it can also impact sleep. A dysregulated nervous system can impact relationships. Have you ever noticed you're a little more punchy, irritable when you're in a launch? I think I've even seen people have hats that say, I'm launching, leave me alone, or something like that. I don't know. Or I'm not responsible for what I've said while I'm launching. Yeah, like, which we laugh because we know it's true. But the fact of the matter is maybe we can find a more regulated way to do this. And believe me, I'm still working on this because as we are building our business and we're in I don't know that I'm in the early stages, but I'm still building it. And as we're in that stage, we still have a lot of other responsibilities to support ourselves so that it's not, I have all the time in the world to just do my launch 3 months in advance. Like, some of us, that might be true. We might have the time. We might not have the motivation. That's a whole nother topic for another day. But we may have the time. But a lot of us, especially if you're someone building your business, you might still be working full time or at least part time. You do have a lot on your plate. And it can be hard to do things way in advance so that your nervous system can be regulated when you're doing something like a launch or a big project for your business. So we want to think about this, how we can get ourselves to be more regulated inside of doing things. And what that means is to stop hustling. Because what happens is when we do what we've been doing, eventually we end up being less productive, which like goes against everything we're trying to do when we work hard. I've heard in a lot of entrepreneurial circles I'm in, something that's said is if you want to do more, do less. If you want to make more, do less, right? And in a lot of ways, I'm finding that to be true. I'm also reading a book called One Thing by Gary Keller. And, ooh, the guy's first name is Jay. I apologize. I don't remember his name. But basically, they talk about narrow in your focus to one thing, right? Like one thing. And I think the thing that a lot of us ADHD women entrepreneurs do is because of shiny object syndrome and the way our brains are, we see someone else, oh, they're doing a secret podcast. Maybe I should do a secret podcast. Or, oh, they have a quiz. Maybe I should do a quiz, right? Instead of just staying the course and focusing on what we have. Because sometimes that can be boring. And our brains love novelty. Our brains need to be interested. However, we have to find a different way for our brains to be interested in what we're doing than constantly changing what we're doing, because otherwise we're never following through, never completing anything to get clients into our door so we can help them and, quite frankly, pull in revenue. Like, it's a both and. And if we are not completing things because we get bored with something and then shift, that's a problem. If we're hoping our business to actually be more than just a hobby, right? If we actually want to be out there helping people and being paid to do it so that we can put our energy fully into it instead of like half-ass helping people because we're not being paid for it. So we're just like, okay, this is like volunteer work and I just need to keep my other job, right? It splits your focus. It makes it harder to be present. As we talk about all this, it's, oh yeah, it all like comes together. And I want to say, we come by this honestly with ADHD. Like I said, I can get into this pattern too. This was a pattern, I want to say skill even, that I learned early on because when I was younger, it got me through school. It got me through college. It just stopped working eventually when I was an actuary. And actually, I was an actuarial analyst, but still, when I was doing that, you have to take these really hard exams. And there just weren't enough hours in the day for me to be hustling and pushing and working hard and dysregulating my nervous system long before I was a therapist and even knew what that was or to even spot that was the problem. So eventually we've got to find a different way. But a lot of us, I don't think I'm alone because I've talked to people, my clients, but also other people who listen to my podcast who are like, yeah, I masked through overachievement too, Jen. And those of us who masked through overachievement might have found hard work and pushing is how we did it. It's just that now, as we're aging, it's no longer working. And so it's time to be like, okay, what can I do instead? And we're at that point. So first little story, as if you've been listening for the past few months, I went through a launch and always fun. I like launching. It's fun because I love teaching and being with people. It's exciting. It is a lot of work, right? If you've launched before, all the moving pieces that are involved in it, the things that people see on the outside are not nearly the length of the list of things that go on behind the scenes. And so it's a lot of extra tasks. I was in my hustling, hard work phase of things where I was pushing and pushing. And then after the launch ended, I noticed and I didn't figure it out right away, which is strange in some ways because I'm usually very insightful, although I think I understand now why I wasn't catching it. But I was having a really hard time getting out of bed. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so tired." I was like, "Maybe I'm just tired from my lunch. I just need some extra rest." And this went on for 6 weeks, right? Like, just this week, I'm finally like, "Oh, okay. Yeah, I can get up and not feel like I'm dragging myself." And so I got myself into that cycle of pushing, 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 and crashing, and yeah, I was still doing stuff for both businesses. I was still seeing my private practice clients, and though I probably wasn't as present for them as I like to be, I was still getting other things done as needed and working in my business for ADHD women entrepreneurs and working with my awesome ladies in my program Ascend and doing all those things. My capacity to do much more was significantly diminished because I was so tired and really I was burned out. I was burned out and didn't realize it. The answer to burnout is nothingness. It's rest. And so I took the time to rest, not even going, "Oh, I think I'm burned out. I should probably rest." It was more just, I can't even do anything right now. And I'm not gonna lie, there were parts of me who were like, "Get up, you've got stuff to do," and guilting me for resting. And then I've done enough work where I was like, "Hey, I get it. I get that you feel that this part of me felt some guilt for resting." And the reality is I needed that rest. When you're burned out, you need that rest. When you've pushed and hard worked yourself to burnout, you need rest. And you rest better when you don't shame and guilt yourself about it. I laugh because that's an obvious statement, but we still all do it. And so if you can recognize when you are resting after a period of this pattern of pushing and pushing, if you can recognize that, "Oh, okay, I just need to rest because I was pushing so hard and there's this part of me that's shaming me or guilting me about it," and work with that a little bit. Like, that makes sense, right? Like, you're always told to work harder and you're not trying hard enough and all those kind of things. So, of course, you have parts of you that are pushing and pushing you, right? Not to mention that there's probably other concerns like, I don't know, if you have the pink ring in your toilet, you're like, "Ooh, I should probably clean that." And if you don't know what that is, you must be better than me sometimes, at least, than me at cleaning the toilet. Because if you don't clean it long enough, there becomes a little pink ring there, which is not good. Pink mold is not good. So anyway, that was a bit of a TMI situation, but we feel the pressure to do this stuff, but when we get in this cycle, we need to rest. And so I wanna talk about what helps me now be productive, both coming out of that period of intensity where I fell back into my old pattern, but also what I do in general that helps me be more productive. Because this is something that a lot of us with ADHD feel really challenged by because of how our brains are wired. And again, productivity is not our value. Like, whether or not we get a bunch of crap done doesn't mean that we're a good or bad person. Like, it's not a moral judgment. It's just a fact of yes or no, did I do it? And we've got to get stuff done because we live, so we've got to eat. And it's probably a good idea to clean things because otherwise you'll end up with, I don't know, bad things happening like mold and stuff. And so it's important that we do that, but we also have to do things for work and our business. And if you, some of you might not have a job anymore, and that's awesome. So it's just your business. And if you have kids, then it's not just anything. And sometimes it's not even a just for your business because there's a lot of moving pieces. And so productivity matters. But the thing is, we've got to learn to work with our ADHD brain instead of against it. And the pushing and hustling and hard working. Yeah, we want to be conscientious. We can certainly choose to work hard, but that way of doing it is not helping our ADHD brain. It's dysregulating us. And I don't know, it might even be further traumatizing you. You might be re-traumatizing yourself from those old messages and old stories about people attacking your character because you weren't working hard enough or trying hard enough. So the first thing that we need to do is have awareness. So if you are one who does these kind of cycles, the first step is to even notice that you're doing it. I didn't catch it this time around. And other times I have, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm hustling right now. That's not useful. And so then when you notice, you can figure out what can you do instead. And I'm going to talk about that. But the first step is awareness, because you can't address something if you have no insight to the fact that it's going on. So awareness is key. It's the first step. The next thing we need to do is make sure we are regulating our nervous system and on a regular basis. And this can mean a couple of things. One is we need to be getting solid sleep. And I know with ADHD, sometimes we can get into cycles where we're not sleeping enough or not sleeping well. And I'm not suggesting that you try to fall asleep, because that will just increase anxiety and make it harder to fall asleep, but to really focus on getting rest and, trying to get as much sleep as you can. When I say as much as you can, like 8 or 9 hours, right? I'm not talking about 13 or more. Who knows? You may need that much sleep depending on what goes on in your body, but generally most of us need around 8. I'm finding in perimenopause, I'm closer to 30 or 8 hours and 30 minutes or 9 hours of sleep. I feel a lot more rested, where when I was younger, I used to feel groggy if I slept for that long. Pay attention to what your needs are. And listen, I get it. If you've got young kids, you might be like, yeah, Jen, okay. And I'm not here to judge. I get that's hard. I will say that when we are not well rested, it is going to exacerbate our symptoms of ADHD, like plain and simple. So if you are finding it next to impossible to sleep as long as probably your body wants you to sleep, at least try and have some grace for yourself when you're like, God, I can't focus today. And so if you're on like 5, 6 hours of sleep or less, that could be part of it, right? And if you've been going on that low level of sleep for, I don't know, how old are your kids? Then giving yourself some grace, because it is going to be harder to focus. And it's just a fact of life, right? Being kind with yourself. You may have to do things at a slower pace, and that doesn't mean you're bad or wrong. It just means that you have other things that also require your attention. So basically, I'm telling you, sleep for your business. I'm just kidding. But truth be told, sleep is something that is going to help us focus better. It's going to help us be regulated in our nervous system and more grounded. Another thing, healthy nutrition. This isn't a shock. No one's, oh my gosh, I can't believe she's talking about this. But getting good nutrition and getting movement in your body. I talk about that all the time. I'm going to talk about a second piece of that in just a moment. But also doing things like having fun. Because if all we're doing is working, then it starts to suck, even if we love what we do. So it's really important to get out and do fun things, and not just fun things that other people like to do, but fun things that you like to do. And it doesn't have to be like, I would like to go to Mexico. You could go to Mexico, but if that's not in the cards for you right now, what if you went and read a book and had a cup of coffee at a coffee shop? What if you just sat and read a book for 30 minutes at a coffee shop? Had someone watch your kids, right? I don't know. Maybe that's not possible, but maybe you can do like mom-kid exchanges or something. I don't know. But to find ways to give yourself space to relax or have fun, it's really important. I will also say making sure that you're getting enough water, right? That's really important. But also, if you're closer to my age, it is important that we're not drinking water. My doctor says 2 hours before bed, which, like, I think drinking water is like my stim. So, like, that I'm like, you're going to kill me if I can't have water 2 hours before bed. She's okay, 1 hour. And I will tell you, it makes a difference. I don't wake up in the middle of the night if I don't drink any water But if I don't drink any water within an hour before bed, then I don't have to get up in the middle of the night and go to the bathroom. And you might think that little getting up and going to the bathroom doesn't do much, but it actually is a huge disruption to our sleep. So if you're getting up in the middle of the night and going to the bathroom, try to cut back on fluids an hour before bed at least. It's supposed to be 2. But then that way you won't be waking up in the middle of the night, disrupting your sleep and thus your focus. The other thing I'm going to tell you, and I'll share this is probably more personal, but I know I have a lot of women my age who listen to this podcast. Something that I find helps me sleep better and be better regulated is when I take my estradiol. I'm supposed to do it twice a week. It's a little bit of a pain because of the way it is, the way I take it. But anyway, I find when I do that consistently, I sleep way better and I'm way better regulated. And then guess what? I can focus better. And I know there was a lot of discussion in the 90s about HRT. I'm not here to tell you what you need to do for yourself, but if you're wondering about hormone replacement therapy or anything to address the transition of perimenopause into menopause, I highly recommend you find a doctor who knows a lot about menopause to do that. Or read Jen Gunther's book. She's a gynecologist with a feminist twist. So she's sassy, a little cheeky, and who doesn't love that? She talks a lot about the way the data was misinterpreted back in the 90s about HRT being bad. It was actually like a very small piece with a very small group of people that was overgeneralized to make people believe it was bad for everyone. Of course, you need to check with your doctor. There are people who have a history of breast cancer who then there can be some contraindications. I'm not recommending anything except to talk with your doctor and maybe read the Menopause Manifesto by Jen Gunther. All right. So that was step 2, regulate your nervous system to be productive. And there's lots of ways we can do that. I also recommend, and I said I would get back to this, doing something every day to release your stress. And we call this completing the stress response because here's the thing. In our modern day society, we are blipping into our fight or flight response way more than it was ever designed to do. This was supposed to be something that was like, on the occasion that we ran into a bear, our nervous system will go, oh shit, and try and get us away to safety, right? Help us survive. But now we get a wonky email. We're like, our boss, if you still have one, is, I need to talk to you. You're like, or your partner says that, or I don't know, you have a icky interaction at the grocery store, but whatever, our nervous systems keep going into their fight or flight response all frickin' day. That was frickin', by the way. Anyway, it didn't sound like it, but it goes all day. And so it's, oh my gosh. But we were never made to do that. It was supposed to be temporary and then we go back down. The thing, every time you blip in to your fight or flight response, your body is flooded with chemicals like adrenaline, norepinephrine, and cortisol to help you fight or flee. But if you're not actually fighting or fleeing, then you're not using those things and they get stuck in the body. And so every single day we have to do things to complete the stress response. There's 7 ways that I teach in my program. I'm going to just tell you the best one right now because it mimics what you're supposed to do anyway, or not supposed to do, but what that energy is meant for, which is movement. Any kind of movement. Movement for 30 minutes a day will help clear that energy from your body so that then you're not getting burned out eventually. Because if you're not doing that eventually, you can get to a state of burnout. So when you are trying to get yourself to be more productive, you need to slow down to go fast. I was told this when I was a school social worker back in the early aughts, maybe mid-aughts, by Dr. Henry Welly. Really wonderful principal I had. Just a super kind-hearted man and one of my favorite principals. I have a couple others that I really enjoyed too. But anyway, Joyce and Chuck. Anyway, he was like, Jen, you do such good work, but you're always going. And then you make mistakes. And so if you could slow down, you would actually go a lot faster. And I was like, whoa, this dude sees me. Right? He was in his 60s. So I think he'd had some wisdom about him and had seen lots and lots of different teachers, school social workers, other faculty and staff to be able to have a broader perspective about how people do things. But he could see it in me. And I was like, yeah, I do need to go slow to go fast. And so what does that mean? For me, it means sitting in silence more. It means making sure I'm getting my full meditation in, not just squeaking by with a couple minutes just to be like, I meditated. And more when I do that, it's like keeping up the habit, right? It's okay. Like I'm keeping up the habit, but really making sure I get at least 10 minutes of meditation or silence. If you're like, Jen, I cannot do meditation, go for a 10-minute walk without music if you can tolerate it. That kind of silence makes a huge difference and will really help you slow down. Another thing that we can do to slow down is really take a look at all of the stuff on our plate and sift through what actually needs to happen here. What do I actually want to do? What and why do I want to do it? And for me, I was feeling so overwhelmed after my launch. I was like, I couldn't even. I just had all these tasks on multiple lists. I had it in my task app, which I use Things, which is nice. But then I also do a list of deep tasks and shallow tasks. So tasks that require deeper focus in one column and tasks that can be done with shallower focus in another column. And those two things were so overwhelming for me to look at that I created a new method for myself. I essentially took like a bunch of pieces of paper and one for home, right? One for ongoing tasks for work, right? Like my podcast or content or whatever. One for things at work that require deep focus that are not ongoing. One for shallow tasks that do not require deep focus, right? And so the more I separated it out, the easier it was for me to tolerate. And I'm not saying we always have to do that, but what I am saying is that if what you're doing isn't working, if it's not helping you be productive, it's okay to try something different. Okay, you could go back to the planner, but if for the last week and a half you haven't been able to get yourself to look at the planner, then like what good is the planner? It's just making you feel like crap about yourself. And instead, if you can be like, okay, what's working? I'm going to do that. And you can always go back to the planner. I've done that before where I'm like, ooh, this isn't working. I'm going to put this aside. In fact, my notebook method, I don't have my notebook with me, but I have a notebook that I just write stuff down to track things. And I keep my deep work, shallow work thing in there. And now my loose sheets of everything is in there too. And that keeps me on track. But there was a period of time I wasn't working and I used a totally different method for a while and that worked for a little while and then I missed this method and went back to it. The thing we want to focus on is effectiveness. And however you do that, it's important that you find a way to look at the things on your plate and decide what of this really has to get done. What would be a good idea, right? My estate attorney recommended that every year I create a statement of my financial holdings so that when I die, it's easier for the people who are in charge of my estate, right? Which is loved ones, right? And that's a really good idea. And it's just not a top priority right now. Maybe it should be. Knock on wood. I hope I live a long time, but I just cannot have that be at the top of the list right now. And so that one kind of came off for a little while. I think I scheduled it for, I don't know, January to see if I still want to do it. We want to start to look at what actually has to be done. We want to look at things and go, does this actually have to be done? And then the next thing is looking at those things. Does it have to be done by you? Does it have to be done by you? I will tell you, I have virtual assistants. And when I was able to fully offload editing and sprucing up my podcast and creating content for my podcast and posting it, like all I do is record and they do everything else. And I don't even review it anymore because they were doing such a good job. I'm just going to trust you're doing it well because it's taking me a while to review every week and it's always perfect. It's always exactly what I want or good enough. But they do a wonderful job. And so it's like when you can offload an entire area of tasks, that can be even better. So it's someone in my life has taught her children who are 11 and 14 to do laundry. And not having to do their laundry has freed her up to be able to do work and actually not have to only ever be working or taking care of the kids or the house, right? Instead, it is teaching them a life skill that they both need to learn and freeing up some of her time, right? So the more you can delegate or offload tasks, I'm not suggesting you be like, I don't want to do anything anymore. And you just put your feet up and order people around. That's not what I'm saying at all. But to get realistic about how many hours there are in a day and your own level of productivity when you're not hustling, and then find something that's doable for you. As part of this, you can always figure out like what tasks can I automate. There's some upfront work in that, but then once you get it, it's oh my gosh, amazing. Okay. So that was step 3 of 5. Step 4 is connecting with your spirituality. It wasn't till this week that I really got back to practicing yoga for a solid 15 minutes every day this week that I started to notice a big shift in my productivity. But this week I was like, you know what? I'm going to read from my spiritual text, which for me is like a yoga text. I'm reading one on Shaivite Tantrism right now, which is like the householder path of yoga. I know those words might sound like, oh my gosh, but it's just like how people who have to have jobs can embrace the practices of yoga because we're not meditating all day or doing 2 hours of yoga a day. So anyway, so I read a little bit of that before I meditate. And instead of just rushing through my stretches after I work out or skipping them, I've been doing that for the last month and a half, which doesn't feel great after doing yoga for, I don't know how long, since 2009, 15 years, 16 years. It was like, ooh, my body usually feels better than this. But as I got back to my spiritual practices, I have felt so much more grounded, so much more focused and connected. And yes, the other things I'm doing is helping too. But there is something about being connected to whatever your spirituality is, being connected to nature. Some people who listen to me might be Christians, so maybe for you connecting to Jesus, or people who are Buddhist. I know it's not really so much about connecting with Buddha, but following his Four Noble Truths, right? Whatever it is that helps you align with your spirituality, and it doesn't have to be religion. It could just be the recognition that there's something bigger than yourself. And as we do that, it lightens the load in our business and somehow it helps us focus. And yeah, some of it could be because it's regulating our nervous system, but I also believe it's because we're connecting to something bigger, including connecting to our own intuition, which really speeds up things. So you may be like, not for me, Jen. I don't like any of that spiritual crap. That is totally okay. Not here to judge. And I found it incredibly helpful for me and for a lot of the people I work with. So the 5th thing I will say, and this one, again, all of these are things that like I'm telling you what to do, but how to do them, you might need to have a coach or a therapist or an accountability buddy or something. You might already know how to get yourself to do these things. That's awesome. But if you're like, how do I get myself to do this? That's a great time to check out a therapist or a coach. Like I'm available for ADHD coaching. So you're welcome to do that. And I'll share this last piece. And again, this might take some of this deeper work, but it's self-acceptance. It's ADHD acceptance. And beyond that, it's self-compassion and self-love. Those can be big asks with the messages we received over the course of much of our life and that we may have adopted. It might be a big ask to love yourself. And I will tell you, if you can at least get to a place of self-acceptance, like, okay, yeah, I need more rest right now. That doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It's not a moral judgment. It's just a fact. Or, wow, I pushed, so now I need to slow down. Or, you know what? I have ADHD. And just because society thinks that I should do every single thing just as doesn't mean that's true. And as you accept yourself and recognize that you're not bad and your ADHD is not bad, it's just a brain wiring difference, you can start to open the door to having more compassion for yourself and maybe even more love. And as you release the burdens that have kept you from those things, you'll be carrying a lighter load and have more ability to focus on the things that you need to do and get the things done that you need to do. I hope this has been helpful for you so that you can crush your productivity or at least find ways to make it a little bit less painful. If you are interested, first of all, if you're interested in some one-to-one coaching, I do have some slots available for that. So you're welcome to reach out. I'm running a special right now. I'll put that in the show notes as the offer that I usually share. This week, I'll share how you can get some one-to-one coaching with me, starting with a complimentary session to see if we're a fit and if I can help you with what you want. No pressure. Just thought I'd let you know that's an option if you're interested in working with me. Otherwise, if you're not following yet, please be sure to follow and share. All right, y'all, take care.